With the recent announcement from Wildlight Games regarding the shutting down of Highguard, I wanted to talk about the saddest element to live service games that I don't see talked about all that much. The fact that it is dead media lost to a moment in time. To give a bit more context, Highguard is a free-to-play live service hero shooter that was showcased at the end of the Game Awards to much vitriol. The game then released on January 26, 2026 to a very divisive reception. People hated it from the jump because it was just another example of live service slop being shoved down our throats. People labeled it as Concord 2, and while the financial loss was not nearly at the same scale, it was undoubtedly an unmitigated failure, losing its player base rapidly within a day, and then especially within a week of launch. It took just over 1 month for the studio to announce the closure of the game, and they would be shutting down the servers for the game on March 12th. The game only had a month-and-a-half lifespan, just insanely short. That's only like 4 Scaramucci's. Years of time and effort and money poured into the game for zero payoff. So much wasted potential. I've made another video talking about how all that time and effort is essentially an opportunity cost where a studio could have been making a game that would be beloved by other people, but instead they wasted that effort and money on the pursuit of catching lightning in a bottle with the live service chase, only to inevitably fail because, well, there's a reason they say it's catching lightning in a bottle. Go watch that video after this one, and hey, while you're at it, why not subscribe to the channel and my Twitch at ItSizzle7 where I play a variety of fun games. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. By the time you're watching this video, Highguard will likely no longer be playable. Unless you played it in that 45-day window that it was out, you will never have another chance to play this game. Same goes for Concord, which only lasted 2 weeks before they took the servers down. Now, these are the worst offenders of this problem, but there are many other games that are lost to time, never to be played again. It's a big issue, which is why the Stop Killing Games movement has garnered so much interest and momentum, because it sucks to see media just get shelved forever, no longer able to be played. And in the case of Concord, you the consumer actually lost money. At least Highguard was free to play. Another game that I actually paid for that can no longer be played is Anthem, which had its server shut down on January 12th of this year. I paid full price for that game back in 2019, but at least I had 7 years to play it. So it's not a Concord level scam, but it still feels bad. And I actually went back and played Anthem in January, and I had a good bit of fun, so it's a little sad that I can no longer play that game. So that brings us to the truly sad part of the video. Even games that still exist for now are somewhat unplayable. The game that got me into doing YouTube in the first place is Destiny 2. That game has gone through countless wholesale changes. The first 2 years of the game is currently unplayable. They launched in 2017 and had the Red War campaign. You can no longer play that. Same goes for Curse of Osiris and Warmind, the 2 expansions that released in the first year of Destiny 2 coming out, and even their greatest expansion, Forsaken, which came out in 2018, you can no longer play that campaign any longer. It's lost to time. Planets that were in the game, such as Io, also gone forever. The game came out with a subclass tree that has totally changed. It used to be nodes that you selected, and then they implemented subclass 3.0 with aspects and fragments. The mod system was changed. There are even raids such as the Leviathan raid lairs, Scourge of the Past, and Crown of Sorrow that just flat out do not exist anymore. Crown was only in the game from June 4th, 2019 to November 10th, 2020. So unless you were playing the game in that 17-month window, you will never get to experience that raid anymore. Additionally, in 2018, they added seasons with seasonal events tied to them. 2019 had events like The Reckoning and the Menagerie, hell, even Gambit Prime. All of those completely unplayable in 2026. Vex Offensive and the Sundial activity from Season of the Dawn, the Corridors of Time, Forges. One of the saddest omissions is Niobe Labs. It was a big secret puzzle that required teamwork and taking out lots of challenging enemies. Every year, the seasonal activities would get recycled out for new ones. They were developing content with an expiry date, knowing full well that it would be deleted within a year tops, sometimes only a few months if it was the last season before a new expansion. The Coil only lasted like 4 months, same with something like the Nether and the Menagerie. These were all fan favorite activities, and again, if you didn't play in that 4-month window, you can never experience them again. And how do you think the developers feel when they know that they are working so hard on something that will just disappear in a few months? I bet it doesn't feel that great. But the content treadmill must keep moving, lest players get bored and stop spending money. And then in 2025, Bungie nuked the old systems of Destiny for the new ones with the Portal, which has been very much disliked. So even that old game that I used to play and love is impossible for me to go back to. Sandbox changes make it so unless you're keeping up with all the latest patch notes, the old build that used to run a year ago is now trash, or some shitty exotic is now the new meta. I used to make Destiny 2 videos, and probably 99% of them are pointless in 2026 because of the way the game has grown and evolved over time. And trust me, I don't love that. I always lamented how videos I was working really hard on would be irrelevant in a few months. I much prefer my new content, which is much more evergreen. I could go on, but by now you get the point. I know Destiny 2 inside and out, but I am sure this problem affects many other live service games. I loved OG Fortnite, like back when it first came out, it was so simple and so fun. I loved dropping Moisty Mire, but then the maps changed, the weapons changed, etc. You can never get that OG Fortnite feeling back, and there are benefits to live service, don't get me wrong. It's cool that studios can keep their game fresh and exciting and give you new metas and new ways to play and new maps and all that good stuff. But a part of me is sad that I will never be able to experience what I experienced with Fortnite back in 2017. Super Mario World 3 on the NES is the first game I ever remember playing. My mom and I would play it together, and I can boot that game up and it still plays the same today as it did nearly 40 years ago. With the Fortnite example, I've heard so many people talk about how amazing and fun Overwatch was in 2016 when it released, but that game also grew and evolved over time, only to finally be shuttered in favor of Overwatch 2, only for the developers to then change it back to Overwatch and revert a bunch of changes and not deliver on PvE, which was apparently the point of the sequel in the first place, when we all know that it was to overhaul the in-game store so they could sell more microtransactions. So again, OG Overwatch is lost to time. There's something so pure about being able to relive and replay games from your childhood, to be transported back to memories of playing it as a kid, or looking at a game through more mature eyes and seeing things differently than you used to. The media didn't change, but you did, and in some cases you will react differently to it now. But with live service, the game you remember fondly isn't even the same game that you stopped playing. I haven't played Destiny 2 in a year, and I want to be clear, I was an expert at that game. But I have none of the new tiered armor or weapons, so I would basically be a noob at this point. But with something like Super Mario World 3 or Super Mario 64, those games are the same in 2026 as they were when they released. So sure, I can technically play Destiny 2 still, but I can't play the Destiny 2 that I once loved. And there will come a day where you can't play it at all. Unless, of course, the Stop Killing Games initiative forces real change. And on the topic of content changing in live service games, another really sad thing about modern live service development is that more games are releasing unfinished with the promise of the future. Again, Destiny 1 and 2 were prime examples of that, but there have been many over the years. One such game is Highguard. The developers gave it one last update like a week before shutting the game down. There is a fine balance here, as you obviously want to drop content later in the game's lifecycle to draw people back to your game, because live service games are inherently designed to keep people playing your game constantly, but you need enough on launch to make that player base satisfied in the first place. Halo Infinite was underwhelming as hell at launch, releasing half-baked, and by the end of its life, it had actually grown into a pretty good game, but of the 250,000 players that picked it up on launch, less than 10,000 stuck around to see that point. How many players may have stayed glued to the game if there was more awesome content when it launched? In my Highguard review, I mentioned how the game had very few live service hooks to keep players invested, no progression systems and things like that. Well, in that final update, they added a whole ass skill tree. Something that absolutely should have been in the game at launch. Arc Raiders had a skill tree at launch, and it gives people a long-term pursuit to work on. So that is another shitty thing with live service games. They are intentionally made to be lacking in certain areas so that it can be added later. Where a game like Hollow Knight Silksong, that is a complete game through and through. Eventually, it will get a DLC and add even more to an already fleshed out game, but with live service games, they are often left intentionally bare just so that cool, new, awesome, enticing features can be added later. In Highguard's case, it is too little too late. Another thing that I said in my review was that it was lacking weapon variety, and in that final update, they also added another new weapon and a new playable character. Again, these are things that easily could have been there at launch and maybe helped the game to succeed. But in a better, more just world, the game would have waited to release until those systems were in place, and other quality of life features such as player stats and more in-depth leaderboards. Marathon just dropped, and Bungie was asking journalists to hold off on their reviews until they can play their new endgame map. How about just adding it in the game to begin with for the players to enjoy? It's just so bleak and depressing. And as more and more live service games are pushed out in the pursuit of the almighty dollar, I really lament the fact that lots of these games won't even be playable in a few years' time. Hell, sometimes it's just a matter of months for them to disappear forever, lost to a moment in time, and that really bums me out. Anyways, that's pretty much it for the video. I just wanted to shine a light on how a lot of live service games evolve and change so much to the point that you aren't even playing the same game that you maybe fell in love with. I only listed a few examples, but I know there are tons of others. Let me know down below which games you used to love that can no longer be played, or have been changed so much that they are unrecognizable. I know a game like World of Warcraft is still going strong, but I very much doubt much of anything is still around from like when it launched back around 2007. I could be wrong, but I'm just saying, the longer these games go on, the more and more they change, and I think that's kinda sad. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more gaming videos. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.